further ado, Enid Eckstein, thank you for being with us here tonight. You can just stand here in front of the screen. Let's make sure that your face is centered. And
oh yeah,
you are good. And
not used to doing a hybrid. Hi everybody. Hi. So I'm here to basically, well, thank you for very much for the opportunity to talk about the Fair Share Amendment. How many people know what it is? Okay, so let's get started. So some of you know what it is, and it basically, in November, you are going to be asked on November 8th to vote on a constitutional amendment that has the opportunity really to be transformative for Massachusetts and to enable major investments in transportation infrastructure and public education, everything from pre-K all the way up to higher ed, and maybe even dealing with the question of, the cost of higher ed in terms of student debt. And we're going to do this because for about 6 years ago, or many years ago, people in Massachusetts have dealt with this problem of our tax structure, our income tax structure really being an unfair structure. Unlike our federal income tax, which is graduated, where if you earn more, you pay a higher percentage, Massachusetts has a flat tax. We all pay 5.05% on our income. And essentially, when you take that and you take the fact that people pay sales tax and other taxes, our tax structure really is not a fair one, and people with lower incomes disproportionately pay a greater share of their income on taxes. So a number of years ago, we started to deal with this, and we said that we really wanted to change the Constitution, and graduated from income tax is illegal in Massachusetts. So we came up with this idea that what we would do is basically create an amendment that had a surtax on incomes over $1 million, which I'll explain, and that money would be dedicated exclusively, and this is the important piece, dedicated to the major needs of the state, which was education and transit infrastructure. So this is what the amendment says, because you'll hear a lot of debate over the next 6 months, but you can go on the Attorney General's website, and basically it says to provide for the resources for quality public education and affordable public colleges and universities, and for repair and maintenance of roads, bridges, and public transportation, all revenues that are received in accordance with this paragraph, which talks about how to change it, that the state would basically assess a surtax on an income over $1 million. So if you earn less than $1 million, you are not impacted at all, which is 99% of the population of Massachusetts. 1% of the population actually earns over $1 million. So if you take me, which I'm giving you as a supposition because I don't earn $1 million, but let's say I earn $1.4 million, and I earn that because I had a good, maybe I was a university president, that's a good example, that's income. I get $1.4 million, my first $1 million is taxed essentially at the same 5.05%. The extra $0.4 million is taxed at the higher rate, which would be an additional 4%, or in other words, 4 cents on the dollar, and that would be taxed, and we'd be paying basically 9%. And that money, importantly, is constitutionally dedicated to transit infrastructure, which means everything from repaired roads, bridges, public transportation. I live in Boston. You just have to follow the stories about the T to know that our infrastructure system is over 100 years old and crumbling as we speak. And then money would go to public education, and that is essentially, investment in our schools. Melrose schools are good, but there's many school systems that are really suffering. And it's not just about not just about K through 12, but really pre-K, which I think we've all recognized, especially in the pandemic. This is really a crisis for working parents. So as I said, only impacts 1%, constitutionally guaranteed. It's a constitutional amendment, and it requires a vote. Now, some people will say, how did it get on the ballot? So 6 years ago, some of you, and maybe the Democratic Committee, actually passed a petition, and you got people to sign to say we wanted it on the ballot. And we got really close. In 2018, we would have been on the ballot, except the Supreme Judicial Court said, no, because there was a lot of, this high tech council and the wealthy interests, filed suit. And so the Supreme Judicial Court said you can't block and chew gum at the same time. Or what they really said is you can't increase it. You can't have a surtax and then you can't dedicate it at the same time. So back to the drawing board, crisis. I can tell you there was a lot of teeth gnashing, crying. And so we went to the legislature, and the legislature, so that was a people's initiative. The people put it on the ballot, so now we went to the legislature, and the legislature has more power, ironically, than the people, and it was a legislative initiative, so the legislature put it on, just, passed it, and then it had to go to 2 constitutional conventions. So last June, the 2nd constitutional convention. So now we're definitely on the ballot. There's some, challenge about what the Attorney General's wording is going to be in her little red book that she comes up with, but we are on the ballot. Repeat, we are on the ballot. So that is nine other states have passed legislation like this. So this is not a crazy idea. In fact, even if we were to pass it, where Massachusetts falls into this is not as broad as other states. But at the same time, the studies debate it will raise even somewhere between 1.3 and $2 billion a year once it goes into effect. And that money is constitutionally dedicated. So could be a huge game changer, transformative for our children and our children's children about how we look at our roads, our infrastructure. Another big thing is we all talk about the greening of transportation. So this is an opportunity. So I could talk a lot about what the amendment is, but I'm sure you're going to have questions. So let me just say a couple of things about what the opposition is going to say. The governor has said, if you pass this, we don't need new taxes, we have plenty of money. Well, not really true. We have money this year because of ARPA, the American Rescue Plan, but that's really for a lot of pandemic relief, like pay the hospitals back, pay the schools back for PPE. And it's one time. What we're talking about is a consistent source of revenue that is renewing from year on in because it's constitutionally required. They say millionaires will leave the state. Well, that is totally completely untrue. See, the millionaires are already leaving. They're getting called to leave.
I just have to take care of my car warranty.
Okay. So, the studies have shown in other states not only do millionaires not leave, but who are we talking about? We're talking about people who are invested in the Massachusetts economy, families who have jobs here, et cetera. And other people will say money will not go to those programs. Well, it's constitutionally required that, the legislature will then appropriate, so it's going to be up to us to be organized, but it will be constitutionally mandated for the money to go to those 2 areas of spending. So the last thing I want to say is the polling is very positive. When people understand what this amendment is, 70% support it, which is really good. What we're concerned about is disinformation, confusion, this, that, as we all know. So we have a very aggressive campaign. I'm working on the campaign as well as many other people. So talking in front of town Democratic committees, getting resolutions passed in town after town, school committees, Arlington School Committee, Somerville City Council passed, trying to think of the others in this region, Cambridge passed, Cambridge School Committee passed, Newburyport, I don't have a list in front of me, but you get the gist. We have a lot of towns. Another thing we're doing is, a lot of public education, tabling, farmers markets, canvassing, etc. So I know you're going to debate this. So instead of my talking at you, because I don't like talking to people, I like engaging. I don't know if people have questions. We can talk about strategy, how we win. But essentially, I'm hoping tonight that you'll start your discussion about endorsing this, and hopefully you will endorse it at your next meeting. And then we can talk about how we engage together in Melrose. I know you successfully, passed the school override. So you guys have a good history of doing things around tax fairness, and this is really about fairness and justice around creating a fairer tax structure. So I don't know how many minutes that was, but if you had questions.
Enid, that was great.
Okay.
You have a wonderful gift for exposition on this.
So,
And so we'll take questions now, and Enid, when you hear a question, if you don't mind just kind of repeating the question back to the person.
sure, no problem.
So let's assume the optimistic number that this raises $2 billion. How do we know that it's going to increase spending in areas like education and transportation rather than just offset the more than $2 billion we're already spending?
So I'm sorry. The question is, how do we know, optimistically speaking, if this were to pass, that your money will really get spent this way as opposed to just pushing it over to another column, right?
Well, no, what I'm saying is we already spent $2 billion on it. We say, this $2 billion is going toward that seat. How do we know that it's actually going to increase the allocation in that area rather than just offsetting money already spent?
So I think there's 2 answers to that. Did you understand, did you get the question? How do we know that it's not just gonna be offset? How does it really increase the extra $2 billion? So one, it's constitutionally guaranteed, so transparency, ability to monitor what the Department of Revenue collects, et cetera. We should, assuming this passes, we will be able to see in the tax year 2023, really 2024, we should be able to see a huge increase in collections. And then, so that's transparency. Second piece is about advocacy, in terms of, the coalition that is gonna do this is a coalition that fought for minimum wage, increased it, paid family and medical leave, and that coalition will be, I think, very active, and we have a lot of strong support in the legislature for people doing this, and for them working to monitor the funding.
So this is not really a true progressive tax structure. So what you're saying is that somebody making $500,000 a year still pays the same as somebody making $50,000 a year. Has any research been done? Why not go for a true progressive? You quoted 70% in favor of this structure, this tax ability. Will that go way down if you actually make it progressive? So the $500,000 earners will all go against it and will fail to gain traction?
So I would say my answer on this is going to be a little pragmatic. There have been the question is how come this approach was taken, and what about people in the middle, like the $500,000 person? Will how does it impact that? And how does this really create fairness? And I would say, if you look at my back, it's black and blue, just a joke. But I went through the fight around graduate income tax in Massachusetts, which was a very bruising fight, and we were trashed. We were like totally defeated. And when this ballot initiative, constitutional amendment was created, it was really looked at what could we potentially pass that would really have enough political support, I guess is the right word, to really tax the ultra wealthy. And I think that's especially true now, given the pandemic. So it's not really about total tax justice, it's an attempt to really create a balance, especially in the pandemic. So, and I think that the figures that have been involved in tax reform in Massachusetts for the last 30 years have found that this approach will generate a fair amount of revenue, not perfect, but really an attempt to create some fairness. It's kind of not a fancy answer, but a truthful answer. Other questions? I convinced everybody, I can go home.
Just quickly, just so I'm clear on this, it's because it went through the legislative process versus the open ballot question or the grassroots, so to speak, ballot question, it's committed to those two funding areas. And I forgot the other question, so that's just the clarification, that's where it will happen.
So the question was asked, what's the difference between what happened 6 years ago when the people, who I always thought had power, tried to put this on the ballot and were told that a people's initiative could not do that, but the legislature has that power. That's unfortunately the reality, but the legislature did have the power to basically to chew gum and walk at the same time. In other words, to increase the surtax and at the same time earmark.
Okay.
Okay, good questions.
I can sing, I can dance.
I have a question for you, Ian, which is, you outlined a few different strategies that you could take in the community to get this passed, right? What strategies have you found have been most helpful in swaying folks to vote for this? Because I'm just thinking about, you mentioned, getting the city council and school committee to endorse it. I think you could do that, but that would be a lot of work right there, engaged in that. So.
Question was asked, what strategies are most effective? We found, we're obviously in the course of a campaign, so I can't say this strategy versus that strategy. But having school committees, I worked on the Fund Our Future campaign, the Student Opportunity Act. We had 102 school committees endorse it, and I think that was very important psychologically and policy-wise to basically, show leaders in the towns that dealt with education, believe that it was in the best interest of the town to see funding. So I do believe school committees, town committees, city councils have an important role because they deal with budgets and they know the shortfall. So that's important because as we get close to election, they can move voters, they can, do things. I also believe just voter education, the things you all know. You get candidates elected, you did a school override, budget override. You know the things, it's education, it's visibility, it's going door to door. There's no magic. It's work, but it's work that is doable. And, we've been building committees in every community. And so, for example, Arlington, I have a meeting on Friday night with 20 people who want to work on this. So this is starting small, but it's really about precedent. So I'm hoping that out of this, maybe a few people want to work with me, and I'm fun to work with.
Anne, you remember your question?
I did,
Good.
being here for 2 years. How it calls for the use of the money for what seems to me as capital projects. How can that happen given that it's going into an operating budget?
I'm not totally sure I understand the question, to be honest.
Okay, so my understanding is that when you collect tax revenues when the state collects tax revenues in such a manner, it has to go into an operations budget versus a capital expenditure budget, which is usually debt driven and is separate. So from what what the literature says, repair structurally dangerous roads, bridges, tunnels, public transportation. Those are usually capital expenditures, one time, big money, debt ridden. So how is using tax revenue is that okay, or is that gonna be challenged?
I don't think it's gonna be challenged because the amendment has gone through lots of legal challenges. The language is very clear. It says that, it goes to these things: public education, affordable public colleges, universities, repair, maintenance, roads, bridges, public transportations, and all revenues that are received in accordance with this are going to a special fund, and then it will be up to the legislature to appropriate.
Okay, but it's only for those, because it's in a fund, it can only go to those expenditures.
That's my understanding.
Okay,
And we'll use an example, like, I'll use Boston, the issue of like free transit for, right now the mayor is using ARPA funds,
Right.
That might be a project that's important to Boston. If you live in the hill towns in Massachusetts where there's no public transportation, maybe a regional, working with the regional transit authority to do that. That's all gonna be political debate, but I've lobbied the legislature for 40 years.
Yep.
And every time I lobby on something we don't have money, that discussion changes. It becomes a different discussion.
She is a candidate for Attorney General. She is one of the most accomplished labor attorneys in the state, has won a lot of class action lawsuits, done so much for working people in Massachusetts. And by way of that introduction, I will turn it over to you. And so our very not terribly high-tech hybrid system is your face is right there, so just make sure you're in camera. You're talking with Karen right now. Hello, Karen. And you are all ready to go.
Okay, so I can't stand in front of the podium like I like to do, because I want to talk with you, Karen, as well as all the folks who are in this room. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Shannon Liss-Riordan. I am very proud to be running to be your next Attorney General. Before I launch into my remarks, I want to say, please support the Fair Share Amendment. I highly urge you to endorse. It is time to make sure that millionaires are paying their share, and our schools and our budget and our ongoing needs of the state need this continued source of funding. So please, I highly urge you to support the Fair Share Amendment. So let me talk to you a little bit about why I am running for Attorney General. I have spent my entire career taking on the biggest challenges and delivering big results for regular people. I have spent my entire legal career using the law as a tool to improve people's lives. For the last 23 years, my entire legal career, I've represented working people. I have made national headlines, leading teams of lawyers, taking on some of the largest corporations in America, and time and again, we have beaten the odds. We have won against, excuse me, I had a cold last week, I'm all better now.
One against pollen.
I've taken on and won against corporations like Starbucks, FedEx, Uber, Amazon, IBM, my alma mater, Harvard University, which I have proudly sued at least 4 times. I have represented all types of working people, from waitresses to construction workers to janitors to firefighters to Uber drivers to strippers, and I've helped them recover hundreds of millions of dollars that corporate America stole from them. This work has changed industries across Massachusetts and across the country, and I'm proud to have spent my career fighting for the people against the powerful and winning. And that's exactly what I'll do for you as your next Attorney General. I know that the people of Massachusetts can really use some wins right now. Income inequality is at an all-time high. Corporate bad actors are taking advantage of workers, consumers, and our planet. Unions and the right to organize are under attack. Parents are having to choose between childcare and putting food on the table. And as we all too horribly know right now, the US Supreme Court is about to take away 50 years of reproductive freedom. The people deserve a champion. I know how to use our legal system to make progress on these and so many of the most important pressing issues facing us, from fighting systemic race discrimination, to standing up for gender equality, to protecting the dignity of work. This is the work that I've been doing through my whole career, and I have taken on, I don't just take on cases, I don't just take on companies, I've taken on industries, I've taken on principles. And I want to just give you a couple of examples. One example is the work that I did. This isn't an industry, this is a little off of the employment arena, but I want to tell you about what I did yesterday. I flew down to Georgia. I was standing in Rome, Georgia, in front of the federal courthouse there, with these extremely brave students. Unbelievable story. It's all over the news. Yesterday and today, I was on CNN today talking about it. These students had been subjected to an incredibly racially hostile environment. They attended a school where white students were getting away with the most atrocious behavior. They were wearing Confederate flags. They were reenacting the murder of George Floyd. They were calling the black students the most racist names that I can't even utter. And so, you know what happened? So a group of very brave black students decided to organize a protest, and they decided that they were going to do a peaceful protest off of the school campus, not during school hours, peaceful protest, and the school administration found out about it and shut it down, and told them they weren't allowed to do that, and that they weren't allowed to wear shirts that say Black Lives Matter, and they weren't allowed to wear shirts that had George Floyd's image, even without any words. It's okay at the school to wave a Confederate flag, it's okay at the school to say the most racist things, but they couldn't say Black Lives Matter, they couldn't do this protest, and they suspended the black students who organized this protest, not the white students who helped them organize the protest. So I was down in Georgia with prominent civil rights lawyer there, who asked me to come and work with him on this case. And we filed a federal civil rights complaint against the school district under the Equal Protection Clause, the First Amendment, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I was so proud to be standing with those students yesterday and how brave they were to stand up and confront this. And their mothers were there and just spoke so movingly of their histories, that their parents were at the sit-ins. You know, their parents were not agreeing to move to the back of the bus And they thought that we had won some of those battles, and now to see their children being subjected to this. And I told the world, I told CNN today, that this doesn't just happen in Coosa, Georgia. This is happening everywhere. This is happening in Massachusetts. I was talking to a delegate just last weekend about experiences she had at her school in Massachusetts. Her children, a black and brown son who she adopted, the incredible racism that they were subjected to, and she filed a case. She filed a complaint against the school. This is a problem because it's happening everywhere, and kids are watching, and they know. They learn a lot from what's okay and what's not okay, and we found out during the press conference yesterday that our clients are related to one of the victims from the Buffalo shooting this past weekend. So, there's a connection there. That shooter, that 18-year-old, he went to a school. He heard what he heard in schools. Our schools need to be a safe place to educate our children, a safe place for them to learn. Anyway, that's what I was doing yesterday. I'll tell you a couple of other examples of the kind of work I've been doing in my career. I've probably best been known over the last decade or so for the work I've been doing on behalf of gig economy workers, drivers for companies like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Grubhub, Amazon. And I actually just got back from a conference with the Mass Association of Trial Attorneys. I was telling them about the work that I've been doing, fighting for employment rights for these workers. I started doing that 10 years ago, and I was the first one to call out that these workers should have the protections of employees. And that work that I started has now sparked a national conversation about the importance of these workers to have their rights under the wage laws, under the anti-discrimination laws, under our labor laws. And if you haven't already, you'll be hearing, most likely this year, about another ballot initiative, one that the gig economy is trying to fund. And they are expected to pour upwards of $100 million into trying to buy themselves an exception from our wage and hour laws and our anti-discrimination laws and all of our employment protections. And I am a proud co-founding board member of a coalition that is fighting very hard to make sure they can't get away with buying themselves a law here in Massachusetts. And the name of our coalition is Massachusetts is Not for Sale. So that's another thing I've been doing. I'll tell you just a little bit about an earlier series of cases I did earlier in my career. When I first started out as a labor and employment lawyer, I started getting calls from waitstaff employees who were complaining that their managers were taking their tips. And these were hardworking people who put food on the table, they paid their rent based on the generosity of the public that they served. But their managers were sticking their hands in their pockets, taking away from their hard-earned wages, their tips, and using it to defray their own expenses and pad their bottom line. I knew that was wrong, so even though there had never really been cases like this before, I agreed to take on those cases, because I found this old law that had been on the books in Massachusetts since 1952. It had never been used before. It was completely ignored. There was no case law about it. But I just looked at that law and I said, I think that law protects workers' tips. So word got out that I was taking on these cases, and pretty soon I found out there was an entire industry that was stealing tips from workers. So word got out, and I was getting calls from waitstaff all across Massachusetts, and pretty soon I had sued just about every hotel, every fancy restaurant, every restaurant chain. So I got started. That first case I took on all those years ago, I lost. So mad, because I knew we were right, so I didn't stop fighting, I kept going. And so the next case, I lost that one too. And I was just so mad, but I didn't let it stop me. I knew we were right, so I kept going, and then the next case I won. And then the next case I won. And then the next case, and the next case, and the next case after that. And a few years later, I looked back and I realized that that string of cases changed the service industry in Massachusetts, firmly establishing the law that tips are for workers, not for owners. And then my work in this area expanded nationwide, and there is now not a hotel or a restaurant or an airline or a gig economy company that thinks that they can steal workers' tips, because they know if they try it, I will come after them. So these are just some of the examples of the kind of work that I have been doing. I like to say I have been working as a private attorney general for my whole career, for more than 20 years, and I am excited about this possibility of stepping up to the next level and continuing expanding on this work on behalf of the people of Massachusetts. And I consider this race to be a job interview. And I ask you to consider my background, my skills, my experience, my passion, and my unparalleled record in delivering meaningful change as you're deciding who you want to hire to be the next lawyer for the people of Massachusetts. I am the only candidate in this race who's represented working people. I'm the only practicing lawyer. I'm the only one who's run a law firm. I am the only candidate who has won the jury trials, who has won the appeals, that have helped shape our laws to better and more fairly serve the people. I have been an activist lawyer throughout my career, and this goes back to my very early days right out of college. I got my start as a women's rights organizer and activist, which I learned working with the legendary Bella Abzug. I am very proud and honored to have received support from about 40 labor unions across Massachusetts. Very excited about the excitement that our campaign is generating. I've been going across Massachusetts talking with folks from the east to the west, from the north to the south, and people are jumping on board. We're getting really great volunteers coming on board. I'm very excited about the upcoming convention. For all of you who are going to it, I ask you please vote for me at the convention to help make sure that we get on the ballot. I'll just close by saying that I've been called a lot of things in my career. One thing that I've been called is the workers' champion, and now I'm ready to be your champion. I'm ready to be Massachusetts champion. So again, my name is Shannon Liss-Riordan. I'm running to be your next Attorney General. I humbly ask for your support. Thank you.
And we can have some questions, and Shannon, if I could just ask, when you get a question, if you could just briefly restate it for the benefit of the person involved. All right, so questions. Anne.
Start off. Shannon, I commend your dedication to labor issues. I think it's great. Attorney General does a lot more other things.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about your other priorities.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So the work that I have been doing, holding corporations accountable, I believe prepares me best to work on all of the issues the Attorney General's office touches. I have the experience of enforcing the laws, and this is going to carry over not just to the labor and employment space, but to consumer protection, to environmental enforcement and environmental justice. Because something that I've learned in my career as a lawyer is that getting the right laws on the books is only the first step. Laws don't enforce themselves. You need a powerful, aggressive, seasoned litigator as Attorney General who knows how to lead teams of lawyers to get things done to make sure that these laws are enforced. So I'll just tell you some of my ideas and some of my priorities. In the Fair Labor Division, that's where people go when they have their wages stolen by their employer. And sometimes it can take a long time. I know this because I've had a lot of interaction with the Attorney General's office, and I've represented clients who, you make a case, you make a complaint, sometimes it can take months, sometimes it can take years for them to investigate. This is just the way the system has worked. But people who need their wages paid, they can't afford to wait months or years. They need to pay rent tomorrow, they need to put food on the table tonight. So what I plan to do is set up a fund where we will take the penalties we will collect from those bad actor corporations who are trying to skirt their obligations, put them into a fund so the people who need their pay can get it right away, and then the AG's office will go after those bad actors. And I'm planning to do a similar thing for environmental enforcement. So I want to make all those bad actor corporations out there who are trying to do what they can to continue profiting off of fossil fuels and ruining our environment. I want to make them pay for building clean energy projects. Okay, so I'm going to take penalties that we'll recover from litigation against these corporations and set up a green bank that we can use to fund clean energy projects, and environmental justice projects. Same thing with the consumer division, that's a place where people should be able to go. They've gotten cheated by a company, they've been deceived, they've gotten their money stolen from them. I wanna make sure that they can get relief and right away, and when we see patterns of activity, and there are a lot of industries where these things happen, it's not just a one-off thing. There are bad actor corporations out there who are trying to make their money through deception. We will go after them. We'll go after them aggressively. And I know also this from my experience. You make some examples of a few of those worst bad actors, and that sets an example. And it sends a message out there. So, and there's so much more. Let me talk for just a minute about the horrifying thing that we learned just recently about the Supreme Court being about to overturn 50 years of reproductive freedom, the Roe decision. That's an issue that I have been working on and fighting for, going all the way back to my college days. I marched for reproductive rights. Right after I graduated from college, I was working for Bella Abzug. I co-founded a national young women's organization to get young women active and out there and having their voices heard in the political process. We were marching for reproductive rights. In law school, I worked at the Center for Reproductive Law and Policy and worked on litigation around the country to protect our reproductive rights. So what is about to happen now that Roe is about to fall is that we're going to see a totally new legal landscape, unlike anything we've seen before. We're going to see new legal issues come up that we haven't seen since the Civil War, because we've got states that are going in different directions. Here in Massachusetts, of course, we were very fortunate to have codified Roe and passed the Roe Act last year. But it's not going to be enough. There's more we have to do to make sure that abortion services are available and accessible to people across Massachusetts. And the next stage of the battles that we're going to see is that the red states, the ones who have already written these trigger laws, which criminalize abortion as soon as the Supreme Court overturns Roe, and those that are in the process of doing it, they're also putting laws on the books that criminalize people traveling across state lines to get abortion services. We need someone who understands how to work the legal system and use creative legal strategies to fight these attacks. And I'm going to do everything in my power as Attorney General not to let other states come into Massachusetts and try to enforce their laws here. Anyone can come to Massachusetts and get an abortion who needs it, and we need to fund that. We need to be a haven. States like Massachusetts, California, and New York, there's going to be a lot of responsibility on us, and we need to provide more access to abortion services because there are going to be people coming here from other states. So there's a whole range of issues. We're going to talk about criminal justice reform. Another just important point that I've been talking about a lot is the role of the Attorney General. The constitutional role of the Attorney General is to represent the state. So I understand that's the role, but I also know from my career as a civil rights lawyer that the state is not always on the right side of the issues. I've gone up against the state and its agencies plenty of times. I have a case right now against the state police for violating our brand new Paid Family and Medical Leave Act. I mean, they're just blatantly violating it. And there are examples of state agencies that are not following our laws, and as Attorney General, I'm not going to let taxpayer funds be used to defend the indefensible. As Attorney General, it will be my job to keep the state and its agencies out of trouble and prevent those issues from ever having to become lawsuits. But if they do become lawsuits and we're not able to resolve them, when I think that they should be resolved in the interest of the people, I can decline to prosecute, I can decline to defend, I can appoint a special Attorney General to take over the defense, and in some of these cases, I'll join the plaintiffs. There's a case right now that I've learned about involving really horrible ongoing issue we have in Massachusetts. Not talked about so much anymore, but it's the age of our housing stock and lead paint that is still rampant throughout Massachusetts. And this is an issue, this is a health issue, this is an education issue, this is an equity issue. We've had a law on our books for a long time that does not address the problem What it does is it allows rampant discrimination against families with children under the age of 6. Because it says that landlords, if there's a unit that's gonna be rented by a family with a child under 6, they have to de-let. So what happens? Do the landlords actually de-let? No. They discriminate against families who need housing. So why are we not trying to change things so that we're getting all of our housing stock de-letted, which isn't actually as prohibitively as expensive as you might think. So there's a lawsuit that brought against the state for continuing to defend this discriminatory non-answer to the problem of lead paint in our housing stock. That's not a case I would defend. That's a case where I would say, let's figure out a solution. So anyway, I know I went on a bit, but I just want to talk a bit about some of the other issues and thoughts that I have about areas the AG's office will address.
Great, thank you.
You mentioned one thing, that you were the only practicing attorney, that had practicing attorney experience for this job. Can you point out maybe 2 other things that differentiate you from the other candidates?
Sure, yeah, well, I'm not going to take I'm not gonna allow any corporate funds to fund this race. I fight corporations, I hold them accountable. I'm not gonna have my campaign supported by corporate funds. I am the only candidate who has not only run a law firm and is a practicing lawyer, but I have also led teams of lawyers across the country in class action litigation, impact litigation. I've coordinated with AG's offices, not just here in Massachusetts, but elsewhere, New York, California. Another important aspect of the Massachusetts Attorney General's office is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done here in Massachusetts, needs to be focused on, but we are also a leader. Other attorneys general look to the Massachusetts Attorney General's office for that leadership, and I am excited and proud to be able to continue the kind of work that I've been doing and coordinate with and partner with AGs across the country. I was just when I was in Georgia yesterday, I met with the DAGA, which is the Democratic Attorney General Association. I met with several AGs and AG candidates, and we had some really good discussions about, I was at an event for women AGs and AG candidates in particular. We had some great discussions about what we're going to get done together when we get elected AG. So that's another point I'm looking forward to in this role.
I think we have time maybe for one more quick question. Maureen.
Could you speak for a minute on gun control?
Yes, another extremely serious issue. So I am the mom of 3 teenagers, and every time I hear about an incident like we just saw 3 tragic incidents this past weekend, my heart just sinks. The problem of guns is it impacts our families, it impacts our communities. I will use the power of the AG's office to, first of all, enforce the gun laws that we have here in Massachusetts, because like I said, laws do not enforce themselves, you need strong enforcement. We are fortunate in Massachusetts to have some of the stronger gun laws in the country, but surrounding states don't have those laws, so a lot of these guns come into Massachusetts. There needs to be coordination among the AG's offices regionally, as well as here in Massachusetts. And another thing that's not really on people's radar screens, but the US Supreme Court, again, is about to issue a decision that is likely going to do for gun control what the overturning of Roe is going to do for reproductive rights. The Supreme Court's on the verge of issuing a decision that we're expecting is going to interpret the Second Amendment in such a way as to prohibit states from prohibiting open carrying of firearms. And I'm horrified about what this is going to mean. And once again, I think we need to have an experienced lawyer at the helm to figure out how are we going to get around these federal preemption issues. How are we going to make sure that our laws get enforced here so that our communities, our children, our schools, our supermarkets are safe? That is a huge area that I'm committed to enforcing aggressively.
All right, well, Shannon Liss-Riordan, thank you so much for being here.
Last thing I need to say before I sit down is please go to our website, Shannon4AG. It's Shannon for FORAG. Find out more, join the campaign. Would love your support. going to be at the convention. Would love to see you at our party Friday night, and would really, really be honored to have you go to the convention. Thank you.
Hi, Janet. It's nice seeing you again. You a good girl. Just let me know what I can do to help.
Well, to help me, she'd have to help every day. Every hour, every ouch, every time my wife calls for help. I mean, maybe she could help me make her lunch. But the crust, all the crust has to be cut off the corners. She could help me run to the doctor for the 5th time this week. Help me with the specialist and the second opinions and the painful paperwork about paperwork. Help me deal with how hard it is seeing my wife's name on so much paperwork. But this is on me. I'm the only one who can do this, like this, for her. Besides,
Take care.
we will. Janet doesn't like her cooking anyway.
Find support for your strength. Visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community.
If you have a telephone, robocalls may be ruining your day. I'm Katie Daffin, an attorney at the Federal Trade Commission. If you answer the phone and hear a recorded message instead of a live person, it's a robocall. If the recording is a sales message and you haven't given your written permission to get calls from the company on the other end, the call is illegal, period. So, when you get an illegal robocall, here's what to do. Hang up the phone. Don't press 1 to speak to a live operator, and don't press any other number to get off the list. If you respond by pressing any number, it will probably just lead to more robocalls. You might consider contacting your phone provider and asking them to block the number and whether they charge for that service. Remember that telemarketers change caller ID information easily and often, so it might not be worth paying a fee to block a number that will change. Finally, contact the FTC to report your experience. You can do that online at ftc.gov or by calling 1-877-FTC-HELP. To learn more about illegal robocalls and what the FTC is doing to stop them, visit ftc.gov/robocalls. That's ftc.gov/robocalls.
Identity theft happens. It's an unfortunate fact of modern life. But there are certain steps you can take to help keep your personal information from falling into the wrong hands. Every day you do things to protect what's most important to you. And you know what? You do them almost automatically. Routine things like looking both ways before you cross, brushing your teeth, and buckling your seatbelt. Another routine to get into is keeping tabs on your identity and personal information. Here are 5 easy ways you can do it. Read your credit card and bank statements carefully and often. Know your payment due dates. If a bill doesn't show up when you expect it, look into it. Read the statements from your health insurance plan. Make sure the claims paid match the care you got. Shred any documents with personal and financial information. Review each of your 3 credit reports at least once a year. It's easy and it's free. And before you know it, protecting your personal information can be as routine as locking your doors at night. For more tips and tools on dealing with identity theft, visit ftc.gov/ID theft. That's ftc.gov/ID theft.
Shopping for a car? Applying for a job? Looking for a home? Or just getting your financial house in order? Then it's time to check your credit report. Good news, it's free. The law entitles you to 1 free copy of your credit report from each of the 3 nationwide credit reporting companies every 12 months. Why is it important to check your credit report? It has important information about your financial accounts, how you pay your bills, and if you file for bankruptcy. You want to make sure everything is accurate, especially before you buy a house or a car, or apply for a job. If you notice something wrong, contact the credit reporting company and business providing the information to correct the error. And checking your report can help you guard against identity theft. Visit ftc.gov/ID theft if you spot accounts that aren't yours. How do you order your free credit report? Order online from annualcreditreport.com, the only authorized website for free credit reports, or call 1-877-322-8228. You'll need to provide your name, address, social security number, and date of birth to verify your identity. Keep in mind, you're entitled to 1 free copy of your credit report every 12 months from each of the 3 nationwide credit reporting companies. So the next time someone asks, "How's your credit?" you'll have the answer. To order your free credit report, visit annualcreditreport.com or call 1-877-322-8228.
Many hotels, coffee shops, airports, and other places offer free Wi-Fi hotspots. They're convenient. Unfortunately, they often aren't secure. That could make it easy for someone else to access your online accounts or steal your personal information. So, what can you do to reduce your risk? Encryption is the key to keeping your information secure online. When information is encrypted, it's scrambled into a code so others can't get it. How can you be sure your information is encrypted? 2 ways. 1. Use a secure network to access the internet. Don't assume that a public Wi-Fi network uses encryption. In fact, most don't. You can only be sure that a network uses effective encryption if it asks you to provide a WPA or WPA2 password. If you aren't sure, it's best to assume the network is not secure. The second way to protect your information is to send it through a secure website. A secure site will encrypt your information, even if the network doesn't. If the web address starts with HTTPS, then your information is encrypted before it's sent. The S stands for secure. Look for HTTPS on every page you visit, not just when you log in. If you use an unsecured Wi-Fi network, to log into an unencrypted website, strangers using that network can hijack your account and steal your private documents, contacts, family photos, even your username and password. If that happens, an imposter could use your email or social networking account to pretend to be you and scam people you care about. Or a hacker could use your password from one website to try to log into a different account and access your personal or financial information. Here are some steps you can take to protect yourself when you use a public Wi-Fi hotspot. Only log in or enter personal information on secure sites that use encryption. Again, look for a web address that begins with HTTPS. Don't use the same username and password for different sites. It could give someone who gains access to one of your accounts access to many of your accounts. Never email financial information, including credit card, social security, and checking account numbers, even if the network and website are secure. Don't stay permanently signed in to accounts. When you've finished using a site, log out. The bottom line, secure Wi-Fi hotspots require a password. Secure websites start with HTTPS. Remember, it's easy to find trusted information about computer security. Just visit onguardonline.gov, the federal government site to help you be safe, secure, and responsible online.
A teacher was what I always wanted to be. I got my doctoral degree in early childhood education. My husband and I had a wonderful marriage, and I lost him in September of last year. I got a call from someone who indicated he was from Medicare. They told me that they needed my Social Security number, they needed my bank account number for new Medicare cards. I told them I was not giving them the information and hung up the phone.
There were thousands of consumers affected by this scam. They told consumers that if they didn't provide this information that they might lose their Medicare benefits, and they implied that that would happen pretty quickly.
They called back and I continued to refuse to give them the information, but they would transfer me to someone else who would give me the same pitch they were giving me. I just wanted them off the phone. I gave them the information they wanted.
These telemarketers are professionals. They know what buttons to push. They know what to say to get people to provide their information. If you receive a call from a government agency, be very skeptical. Government agencies don't call consumers to ask them for money. They don't call consumers to ask for personal information.
I think it is very important that all of us continue to learn about scams.
Because of consumer complaints like the one we received from Dr. Bowers, we were able to go into federal court, get a freeze on the defendant's assets, and shut the company down.
I was so glad to even hear that they did win the case and shut the people down.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight, both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand, trying to text somebody back, because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.